I really don't want to take this chance. This is a lot of humility, but I certainly need to clarify. These have been a comprehensive presentation. I have certainly certain differences of opinion. I think in forums of this nature, I do not think we need to discuss about the minority. I will only mean, I do not want to say anything except to know what the Supreme Court judgment has said. I will read out the Supreme Court judgment. I certainly have problems with nobody talking about a minority judgment because Justice Gawai gave a minority judgment, and then Bella Trivedi also had certain difference of opinion. I have that difference of opinion. I have read comprehensively the Supreme Court judgment in the last 3-4 months. I have a copy of it. Let me read out the operator portion. I think as you have initially made your remarks, Mr. Speaker, we will only go by what the Supreme Court says. Number one, on August 1st, 2024, the 7-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court, if you have any difference of opinion, you have the right to intervene. On August 1, 2024, a 7-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court upheld the validity of sub-classification. I request all of you not to use the word categorization. The Supreme Court nowhere used the word categorization. They talk only about sub-classification. I also would like to tell all our friends here, Supreme Court nowhere talked about mala mafia. We should not use that expression at all. It's a 550-page judgment. So what did the Supreme Court say? On August 1, 2024, a 7-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court upheld the validity of sub-classification within the scheduled caste and scheduled birth categories. Right? That is the essence of the Supreme Court judgment. However, I think that is very, very important. The 6-1 majority also noted that scheduled caste notified under the presidential list of 1950 under Article 341 were not a homogeneous group. Very, very categorically they have said that. That is what is important for our discussion. We have to go by a majority judgment. Supreme Court is Supreme Court. And then homogeneous groups. They face varying degrees of discrimination. Supreme Court has recognized that. There are varying degrees of discrimination. I'm quoting the Supreme Court, no interpretation. I take journalism. I don't want to interpret. Facts are facts. Facts are sacred. Supreme Court is sacred for me. The decision overrules the 5-judge bench decision of the court of E.V. Chennaya versus State of Andhra Pradesh, which gave the judgment as you said in 2004. Let me further say, it's very, very important for all of us to understand in perspective. Does Article 14 permit sub-classification? The Supreme Court, in the majority opinion, said yes. Under Article 14 endorses, I'm quoting from the court, parity of treatment under the parity of conditions, not sameness. Sub-classification is a facet of equality and it is permissible. In the majority judgment. And then, second, this is important for our discussion. Only 7 points I want to make. Number 2, are scheduled caste a homogeneous group? Supreme Court categorically in the 6-bench judgment said, no. Inclusion in the presidential list is not an indication of homogeneity. There is a historical evidence to suggest there are varying degrees of backwardness within the scheduled caste group. And Supreme Court has quoted 27 judgments on this issue, on perhaps even a little more. Then another important discussion which is required for us. Does sub-classification amount to tinkering with presidential list? Very, very important for our discussion. Are we tinkering? As we very rightly pointed out, 341 we cannot exclude or include. Supreme Court in about 20 pages have very clearly said, no, it is not tinkering with 341. What is the Supreme Court said? The count of E.V. Chennaiya versus State of Andhra Pradesh incorrectly held that subclassification amounts to, according to the Supreme Court, amounts to tinkering with the presidential list. Subclassification now, the Supreme Court said, does not, I have a problem with my side. Subclassification does not entail inclusion or exclusion of caste from the presidential list, and therefore it is not tinkering. We are not changing. 341. One more point. Does Indians have any restricts classification? I think for our discussion, OBCs are not required because Indira Savani case only deals with OBC. We are only talking about scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Though my friend quoted extensively, that is only relating to OBC. They did not look at SCs and STs. Now, one more important point. Do states have the power to create subclassification? Supreme Court examined this very, very comprehensively. Supreme Court said yes, the states have the power to create subclassification within the SC/ST under Article 14, 15, and 16, which are quoted quite extensively. Then comes last point. What are the limits for subclassification? According again the Supreme Court. Classification in which certain castes within the presidential list are excluded completely from the benefit of reservation. Are subclassification subject to judicial review? I think you have made it very clear. Yes, Supreme Court said. States cannot act according to their whims and political interests, which we did not mention, but that is my worry. State cannot, whims and fancies and political interests, they cannot have it because recently we carried out a survey in Telangana. Earlier government also carried out another survey. There are some whims and fancies and political interests there. Let me read out the Supreme Court. Yes, states cannot act according to their whims and political interests. Any state legislation creating some subclassification must be based on data and subject to judicial review. But what is important, I'll just take one point. The judgment talks about, this is slightly my interpretation, deepening of social justice. It talks about ensuring equality. It talks about ensuring diversity. Supreme Court also talks about suffering from historical and social disabilities and social discrimination. And Supreme Court also, as I have said, it is not a homogeneous group. Lastly, I will exactly quote what the Supreme Court says and then wind up. 6 of the 7 judges have now ruled that 2004 judgment was wrong. In his judgment on behalf of Justice Manoj Mishra, Chief Justice Chandrachud held that SC communities are not a homogeneous class as ruled by earlier judgment. He disagreed with the view that both of them have disagreed. 4 of them have agreed with them. That's a 6-judge judgment. He agreed with the view that the act notifying the list of SCs create a deemed fiction. They have used the word deemed fiction, that all of them have a similar status. In other words, it's fictional to think, it's fictitious, unrealistic to think that all of them belong to the same group. He disagreed with the view that the act notifying the SCs created deemed fiction and all of them have a similar status. Lastly, it is true that they have a common constitution, identity as scheduled caste based and their experience of untouchability. And the Supreme Court talked about both of them, all these caste based untouchability and discrimination, but that does not mean there is no heterogeneity. There is heterogeneity. That does not mean there is heterogeneity among them. He cited historical, empirical evidence, etc., etc. Then went about doing it. Lastly, the court permitted some classification of scheduled castes, but the state should have rational basis for doing it. Empirical, scientific, evidence-based. I do not want to quote several other judgments because he's already quoted. If you have any kind of a difference of opinion with me, I've very fairly, objectively quoted what the Supreme Court said without any interpretation. For my appeal, let us not discuss the minority judgment. Minority is a minority judgment. It's a 6-1 one judgment. Let us not discuss, creamy layer, because, in the Supreme Court they did not agree on a creamy layer. They only incidentally mentioned, if I may use that word, creamy layer is not of concern for us here. Then of course, in the backward classes there is a creamy layer. All of us are fighting that case. Myself, there is an appeal in the Supreme Court on the creamy layer issue. So this is what I want to say. Number one, we will confine our discussion to 6-page judgment, majority judgment, and what they have said, where they have discussed, or they have identified 6 issues which are important, crucial for a discussion. I will appreciate if the discussion is confined to that. Then it becomes easy for us to move forward. When I get an opportunity, I will, because I've been interacting with these groups for the last 3-4 months, informally, formally, with the students, with the various groups. Then way forward comes, is there a solution? 100% there is a solution, provided we have commonality on these issues. Commonality on this issue. Lastly, I hope this discussion is going to be very, very harmonious, very, very academic. It is not acrimonious, because 10 discussions have attended all over. I spoke 3 days ago in Lucknow, where majority of them did not agree with me. I don't want this discussion to have that kind of nature. They are very, very distinguished advocates and distinguished professors, and we must find a solution. We can only find a solution provided we agree on the majority judgment. Let's not get extraneous issues like trivial layer, minority judgment, etc., etc. Then we'll be in a position to find a solution. I thank all of you for giving me this opportunity. I did not want to intervene. I only came to hear. I thought I will learn, but then when there's some kind of a direction, a discussion takes place, I thought I should try to intervene and make my part. Thank you very much.